Cyberpunk 2077 just received yet another 30GB update for the game. It has been 7 weeks since the last update this game has received, and it really felt like there was a lot riding on this one. A lot of people curious as to what was going to happen, especially as of late how we just heard the game would be returning to the PlayStation Store. So it definitely made it seem like this update would be substantial. In reality, it's actually kind of turning out to be a massive disappointment. It definitely does some things really good. We're seeing some good FPS improvements on consoles. We'll go deep into all of that, but there's definitely a lot of pushback against this update overall, and many are viewing it as one of the more disappointing ones, so we'll go into exactly what's going on with that also. There are timestamps down below for the various sections of this video, although with that said, I know a lot of you guys were pretty upset about something with Cyberpunk. Despite the several large bodies of water found all throughout the game, there's simply no way to fish in Cyberpunk 2077. Well, I do have a pretty phenomenal surprise for all of you today, and that's thanks to today's video sponsor, Fishing Clash. Fishing Clash is a free-to-play game available on both iOS and Android, and it really fits a wonderful niche for those of you that are just sick and tired of the constant onslaught of various shooter games. The game will take you to all kinds of various fishing spots around the world in several different very pretty locations, ranging from rivers in the Amazon to lakes in Japan, where using your own specific set of equipment, you'll be able to catch literally hundreds of different fish species, from some of the simpler stuff like catfish and salmon to much larger and more rare things like sharks and more. Along the way, as you catch bigger and better fish, you're going to need better gear, so you'll be consistently collecting and upgrading your fishing rods, lures, and other equipment to hopefully get your biggest catch yet. And as fun as this can be doing it on your own, where this game really shines is in the competitions, as you could have player-to-player duels, challenges, tournaments, and even full-scale championships to put your skills and equipment to the test and try and beat out other players for awesome new rewards. And trust me, some of these tournaments will really suck you in, wanting you to consistently improve your skills and upgrade your equipment. Every single week, there's new events to discover and new adventures to be experienced. All along the way, the game features great 3D graphics, in particular with many of those fish models that you can interact with and move around. But don't wait, Fishing Clash is free to play and available on both iOS and Android, so you can download the game right now via that link in the video description and help support the channel. Looking back over at the most recent update for Cyberpunk, the biggest category of fixes are yet again some of those quest-based fixes. It's been a consistent priority of CDPR to fix some of the progress blocking issues, whether it be things not spawning, dialogue not playing, and here again that was a big focus. We saw a ton of gigs get fixes, as well as that introductory heist quest got quite a few fixes, so pretty good for people who are maybe playing for the first time, like if you could just now buy it on the PlayStation Store. But in addition, some more minor miscellaneous bug fixes around quests. River's video finally has normal sound so you could actually understand it. A couple of the Cyber Psycho missions got fixes. There was this problem where after completing it, or functionally completing the Cyber Psycho mission, you couldn't actually text Regina back, which was a big and frustrating problem, especially if you just had a big fight, but fortunately we've seen that fixed. NPCs in general got a pretty nice upgrade with this one. There used to be this problem where after killing an NPC and stealing their car, their body would just stay there very awkwardly. That was fortunately fixed, so you can now take cars at will. There's a weird bug while when holding an NPC, you would kind of body slam it for a huge effect. That was fixed. They fixed various issues relating to clipping in NPCs' clothes again. So this was actually fixed in the last update to the game, except it wasn't. And there were still several pieces of clothing in Cyberpunk where parts of your body would basically just stick through your clothing. So if you're trying to take a cool picture with specific types of clothing, I mean, I guess it's still a cool picture, but definitely a different vibe here. It seems like that was actually fixed more comprehensively with this update, much less clipping overall. Perhaps one of the most prominent lines in the patch notes that got quite a few people excited though was memory and IO improvements leading to fewer instances of NPCs with identical appearances spawning in the same area and to improve streaming. So you probably saw the videos. In Cyberpunk, there was a problem where you'd be walking around and you just see NPCs that are exactly the same. They physically have the same face, body, and clothing. And seemingly this was a fix or improvement on it, except it's just not. It literally took me 15 seconds of looking around to find two fully identical NPCs with this patch. It is not fixed whatsoever by any definition of that word. And in fact, as I was filming those two identical NPCs being in close proximity, two other identical NPCs passed by in the background. If you take even just like 10 to 20 seconds of actually looking at the NPCs around you, I was very easily and very regularly able to find identical NPCs walking around and sometimes looking at each other. And in fairness to CDPR, it definitely feels like it's a bit better. It seems like what they did with this update was add in in additional outfits or kind of clothing variety to NPCs, so there are more different combinations. So you'll see identical NPCs less often, at least hypothetically, but in practice they're still fairly common, so it doesn't really feel like calling this a fix, but maybe like inching in the right direction. Although one thing that did actually feel a bit better was that weird issue where sometimes you turn around and all of the NPCs behind you would just despawn. Seems like that was happening a lot less often. I'm not sure if it's directly related to this improvement, but that is definitely a nice upgrade. There's some fixes around Johnny's spectral appearance. This would sometimes glitch out or only be half applying. That was finally fixed. And one of the funnier lines in the patch notes fixed an issue where one of the maelstromers was T-posing. Just one. So one less T-posing in Cyberpunk. Game of the year. One fix that was much needed is the Cata-resist cyberware was finally fixed. This is a big one. It was a piece of cyberware that seemingly would just not work properly, disincreasing your resistances, and I'm sure a lot of you guys read the description, applied it to your character, maybe paid a lot of eddies for it, but it wasn't actually doing anything. And now that it actually does work, I feel like you really notice it. I do feel far more tankier with this actually applying, as my resistances are increased by 35% with this legendary version of it. Unfortunately, not everything was fixed on the cyberware front. Things like the sensory amplifier as well as neofiber still don't seem to actually work. Sensory amplifier will increase a bunch of your stats, neofiber will increase evasion. Evasion in general is one of those things that has been plagued with bugs in Cyberpunk, and they're still there, or at least one of them is still there. But then some of the heavier stuff. There's a variety of crash fixes and CPU optimizations described with this update. These being across the board, but some specific ones with consoles and the processing on consoles. And this actually felt particularly noticeable. I did a couple of before and afters, driving around through some denser areas, not super dense, but moderately dense, as well as fighting a few enemies, and I definitely feel like it is trying to maintain 30 FPS a lot more now. Almost the way I would describe what it feels like is it's trying to prioritize 30 FPS to a higher degree at the cost of something. Like, it felt like with the update, I got 30 FPS more often, but pop-ins were a bit more visible between textures, vehicles. It seemed like there was less NPCs overall. I saw textures loading more often, and like just in general, you can kind of see the streets are pretty dead as I'm driving around in some of these clips. This was tested on my Xbox One X, and for me, I actually really like this change. I felt like the FPS improvement was in fact noticeable, and I honestly don't mind not having a ton of random NPCs in the background. If my options are 30 FPS or random NPCs, I'll pick 30 FPS. The pop-ins also weren't a huge issue. Yeah, it's not ideal. Yeah, it looks bad for a $60 game, but just kind of feels like this is where we're at. This is the things they have to do to actually get closer to 30 FPS. It's still not perfect. Like, you could easily drop depending on the area of Night City, but again, those before and afters, I definitely felt an improvement after this update in the areas I was testing. But again, as you drive around, sometimes if you go to a denser area, you're gonna drop and you'll feel it. And it seems like there is a similar tale on PS4. There's this great video on YouTube. I'll have a link to the full version down below, this being on a base PS4, and you can see it is also hitting 30 FPS a lot more often, similar to my experience on the Xbox One X. On PC, I didn't notice much of a performance improvement, but there was a really nice change. They made it so now a pop-up message asking to verify the integrity of game data will be displayed when incomplete or corrupted game data is detected. There's actually been a problem with Cyberpunk, in particular after updates, where people try and launch the game and it would just crash immediately. And it seems like it was something with having to verify the integrity of the game files that would fix it. So hopefully this leads to less of that crash happening and people desperately trying to figure out how their game broke after an update. They also fixed an issue on PC. When you hit Alt-Enter, it would make the game appear unresponsive. And really, that's it, which is somewhat problematic and a big source of frustration with the community. There's a ton of stuff not fixed with this update. There's still some remaining ghost quest markers, so a quest marker that just doesn't toggle or doesn't actually do anything. There's a bug with a few quests in the game with Cinnamon and Wakako talking. Brendan, the vending machine quest, has a bug, and even a bug with the quest, a killing in the name. Some of these, unfortunately, are persisting because if you are using an old save, you might have progressed past a point where the bug's kind of just ingrained into your save now, and there's really not much anyone can do. You have to start a new game. But then some other stuff like broken mirror animations. The facial animations being played in mirrors were broken a couple of patches ago and still aren't fixed. I've had this issue with gig names overlapping on the difficulty. It's not a huge issue, but it just looks silly, and it's been 6 months. Vehicle draw distance is still an issue, as well as texture pop-in and just in general pop-in. But if you're on a highway and you just kind of look out, and this is maxed out on PC, you can just see this weirdness with vehicles converting from 2D to 3D, but they don't actually convert, so they despawn, then a new vehicle pops out out there, it's not really that far away where you don't notice it. If you're driving in an open road, you will see this fairly often. And of course, still no quality of life improvements. You still cannot edit your character after you create it initially. There are no crafting slider for mods. This is one of the biggest and craziest ones to me. CDPR added in a crafting slider, finally, but it doesn't apply to mods. Mods work in a way that you just have to craft a bunch of them and you'll get random varieties of them. Some of them will be better, some of them will be worse. The way to get better ones is you just mass craft them and hope for the best. Sounds perfect for a crafting slider, right? Yeah, I agree, except they have never added it in. This is the one that blows my mind the most because it seems so simple, and if anyone played this game, they would notice, hey, this is really annoying to sit here and hold down the mouse button for a while. Okay, that one was a little ranty, but it's just been really frustrating me. The cops still, of course, have issues. There's been no changes around them. I do have a mod that fixes them. I'll have it linked down below if you're on PC. I really love it. And really where I think a lot of this user disappointment comes from is we hit a couple of big milestones. The game's now 6 months old. It reportedly is coming back to the PS Store, and it's also been 7 weeks between this and the last update. The last time we had a gap this big, we had that update with hundreds of fixes. This one pales in comparison. It feels more on the scale of a hotfix than an actual update. And for this to be 7 weeks of work definitely makes me concerned for the future. There's a lot of other stuff that needs fixing. There's a lot of stuff that needs improving, and I'm not sure how long it's going to take for this game to get into an appropriate state, even on PC on a high-end system, which is how I predominantly play it. Now, if CDPR turns around and has another big update like the patch 1.3 update is in a week or two, then I'm mostly okay with this being a smaller one. Maybe it was one they just wanted to quickly get out before it returned to the PlayStation Store to fix another round of bugs. Then it's all fine, but we don't really know. And right now, the way it feels is we've waited 7 weeks and this is all they have to show for it. It's not like this patch breaks anything or causes any major issues, and there definitely are nice improvements, at least in my eyes, on consoles, but there's also a lot more that just simply needs to be improved. Even just in the front of perks and cyberware, there are still certain perks and certain cyberware that do not work whatsoever. It has been over 6 months, and although initially I understood, okay, they're prioritizing game-breaking bugs, at this point it feels like those should have all been fixed. In reality, it feels like every couple of months a couple of perks or a couple of pieces of cyberware are fixed, and it's just been this gradual improvement and still hasn't addressed everything. Now looking ahead, perhaps we actually get some news this week. Again, the game is returning to the PlayStation Store on June 21st. We saw how the refund form on PlayStation is going down tomorrow, so maybe CDPR will have something to say. I was really surprised they missed E3. We still don't know really anything about upcoming DLCs, despite the fact that they have reaffirmed that they are coming at some point in 2021. And again, the hopeful side of me does think that maybe another big update is just a couple of weeks away and this is something to quickly get out, but I guess time will tell on that front. But with that said, I do want to give another big shout out to Fish and Clash for sponsoring this video. It really is a great experience, a nice change up from the typical FPSs you're finding on mobile, and sponsors like this do really help keep the channel going forward. So again, you can download the game totally for free using that link in the video description on both iOS and Android. But with that, hopefully you guys found this one informative. As always, again, I thank you for watching, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.